You're bent over a patch of frozen earth. Your hands are numb. Your breath clouds the air in front of your face, and your fingers crack with every movement. You're digging, not fast, not strong, just enough to show you're working, not for the crop. Not even for yourself, but for the man who owns the land and for the God who sees everything. Then it comes, the bell. 1, 2, 3 heavy tolls from the chapel tower in the center of the village. You freeze, not because you're tired. Not because you're listening, but because you're supposed to. Because that bell means it's the third hour, and if you're not seen pausing, bowing your head, making the sign of the cross, someone will notice. You wipe your hands on your tunic. The mud doesn't come off, you bow your head anyway. You whisper a line you've heard since childhood. You don't know what it means, it's in Latin. The priest never explained. He just says it louder each week, and you're told to say it too. Say it or suffer. You look up not at the sky, but at the chapel. Its shadow touches the field where you kneel, and you remember what the priest said last Sunday. God sees you when you steal a glance at your neighbor's wife. God hears you when you curse under your breath. God knows what you do in the dark, what you think while you sleep, what sins you carry in silence. You don't know if it's true, but you know what happens to those who don't believe it. You remember the man who stopped coming to Mass, he got sick. They said it was punishment. You remember the girl who gave birth out of wedlock. She bled to death in the straw and wasn't allowed a Christian burial. You remember the old widow who stopped paying tithe. Her house caught fire and no one helped her rebuild. All of them gone, all of them shamed, all of them warnings, so you pray, not because you believe you're being saved, but because you're afraid not to. You kneel because it's safer than standing. You confess sins you don't understand in a language you can't speak to a man who says he speaks for God but never speaks like you. You go back to digging. The bell is silent now, the moment has passed, but the weight hasn't, the gaze hasn't, because in your world God doesn't smile, he watches, always, and you were taught from the day you could walk. If he sees you wrong even once, you'll burn forever. The church wasn't just a building at the center of your village, it was the center of everything. It told you what day it was, what hour, when to wake, when to kneel, when to stop working. When to plant, when to bury. It wasn't just your calendar, it was your government, your judge, your record keeper, your grave marker. It didn't just host ceremonies, it issued them. It didn't just preach rules, it enforced them. You didn't get married without the church. If you did, your union wasn't valid. Your children were illegitimate. Your family had no legal protection. If your wife died, you had no right to keep her dowry. If you died, your land went to the Lord unless the church said otherwise. You didn't bury the dead without permission. No priest, no funeral, no funeral, no salvation. No salvation, no peace. The body would rot just the same. But the soul, they said, would drift, damned, unblessed, unloved by God. Your newborn didn't count until it was baptized. If it died before water touched its skin, it had no name, no soul, no place in heaven. Just a hole in the ground and a mother left with silence and guilt. Even time belonged to them. Days weren't numbered, they were named. Saints' days, feast days, holy days, 40 Sundays a year where labor was forbidden. You obeyed not because it made sense, but because to disobey was sin. And sin wasn't just spiritual, it was punishable with fines, with shame, with excommunication, a sentence worse than death. Because once the church turned its back on you, so did everyone else. No one would trade with you. No one would marry your daughter. No one would touch your dying mother. Your field could wither and your soul could rot, and the village would say, he brought it on himself. You didn't have a state, you didn't have rights, you had the church. And the church was not a suggestion, it was the law. And law didn't come from courts, it came from pulpits. Spoken not with debate, but with incense, Latin, and the quiet power of a locked door. Hell wasn't an idea, it wasn't metaphor. It wasn't discussed in parables or debated in sermons. It was real, it was near. And it was waiting for you. From the time you were a child, you saw it not just in words, but in images carved into stone, painted on church walls, stitched into priestly robes, flames licking the feet of naked sinners. Hooks pulling tongues from mouths, demons tearing skin from backs, laughing with teeth too long to be human. There were no soft warnings, no gentle guidance, just punishment drawn in color, described in detail, spoken over and over until it embedded into your spine. You were told that one bad thought, one bad glance, one missed mass, one impure dream, and you could be next. The priest didn't smile when he spoke of it. He didn't soften his voice. He told you that pain here, hunger, loss, cold, was temporary, but hell, that was forever, forever burning, forever choking, forever screaming, and no escape, no death to save you, no second chance once you were there. And it wasn't just for murderers, it was for the proud, for the lazy, for women who bled too loud, for men who skipped confession, for children who disrespected their fathers, for those who questioned why a rich man had more than they did. For those who didn't tithe, for those who worked on the wrong holy day. You couldn't fight it, you couldn't argue, you couldn't defend yourself because the judgment didn't come after life. It came during it, through whispers, through illness. Through every misfortune that struck your family, that cow that died, maybe God's warning, that baby born cold, maybe your fault, that bad harvest, the priest said sin had crept into the village. Better find it, better confess. Better be the first to kneel, or they might think it's you. You didn't need to see hell to fear it. They made sure of that, they drew it, they described it, they hung it over your bed like a sword you couldn't remove. And when you woke in the night, covered in sweat, heart pounding, you didn't call for help, you whispered a prayer, because hell was always one mistake away, not just after death, but here, now, inside your chest, inside your thoughts. Inside every silence the church didn't explain. You confessed not because you were sorry. You confessed because you were terrified not to. Once a week or more, you entered the church, knelt before a man you barely knew, and began listing things you didn't fully understand. Did you lie? Maybe. Did you covet? Possibly. Did you think something you should? Almost certainly. But the truth didn't matter, because in a world where thoughts were sins, you were always guilty. You were taught that your soul was constantly under siege, that the devil whispered into your ear while you slept. That temptation wasn't something you chose, it was something that found you. And if you didn't speak it aloud, purge it, it would take root, fester, and drag you straight to hell, so you confessed everything. You told them about the bread you stole, the anger you felt, the impure dream you had after watching your neighbor's daughter lift a pail. Even the days when you felt nothing, no love, no fear, no faith, that too was a sin, spiritual emptiness. The priest listened. He rarely reacted, just nodded. Sometimes asked questions, pointed ones, specific ones, about your wife, about your body, about your thoughts in the dark. You answered, ashamed, because he was the gatekeeper, because what he said next determined whether you were cleansed or marked. And when he gave you penance, a prayer, a fast, a coin, you obeyed. But sometimes that wasn't enough. Sometimes you were told to buy your forgiveness, not with prayer, with silver, indulgences, a word you couldn't spell but understood well. Money traded for mercy, coins dropped into a box to shorten your time in purgatory or to shave years off the burning of someone you loved, your father, your daughter, a baby who died before baptism. You paid because the alternative was eternal fire, and because everyone around you paid too. And if you couldn't afford it, you gave grain or a blanket or your silence. You gave what you had because guilt was currency. And the church always collected. No one told you what was enough. No one told you when you were forgiven. So you kept confessing, kept fearing, kept paying, because they said God forgives, but only if we say so. Your body was not your own. From the moment you were born, squirming, crying, unbaptized, it belonged to the church. Your head was dipped in cold water. Words were said over you that you didn't understand, and just like that, you were bound, claimed. Branded not with iron, but with ritual. You had no say in it, you never would. You were told how to sleep, when to fast, what to eat, and when to abstain. Meat on certain days, sin. Milk during Lent, sin. Sex before marriage, damnation. Sex outside marriage, adultery, sex for pleasure, even in marriage, careful, God is watching. And it wasn't just about what you did, it was how you did it, how you thought about it, what you wanted. Desire was not yours to claim. Lust, even if only in your mind, was a gateway to ruin. The church taught that even a passing urge could be enough to stain your soul forever, so you buried it. You kept your eyes down. You looked away when a woman bent to tie her sandal. You turned your thoughts into knots. You prayed harder when your body betrayed you in the night, in your sleep, in silence. For women, the rules were sharper, more brutal. Your body wasn't just not yours, it was a source of suspicion. You bled once a month unclean. You bore children blessed, but only if inside a sanctioned marriage. You dared speak out, assert, disobey. Witch, temptress, whore, pregnancy outside marriage, proof of sin, proof of spiritual filth. Your baby might not even get a Christian burial. Your marriage wasn't yours either. The church had to approve it, and once approved, it became unbreakable. If he beat you, pray. If he drank and disappeared for weeks, pray. If you wanted to leave, you couldn't. You were one flesh, they said, bound until death, or until one of you vanished into scandal. Even your death didn't belong to you. You couldn't choose how to go. You couldn't choose what was done with your body. If you died unconfessed, you were buried without rites. If you took your own life, even in despair, the church denied you the ground. You were dumped, nameless, outside the village wall, and your mind, they never let it grow. You weren't taught to think, only to obey, to memorize, to kneel, to accept. Curiosity was danger, doubt was rebellion, silence was safest, because in the end they didn't just want your belief, they wanted your silence, your compliance. Your flesh, your guilt, your body was the Lord's, your soul was collateral, and your thoughts. They were never truly yours to begin with. You weren't just told what to believe, you were taught not to question it, not once, not ever. You learned early that asking why was dangerous. Why does God need a tithe? Why does the priest live in stone while I sleep in mud? Why is suffering a test, but only for the poor? Questions like those didn't get answers, they got silence. Or worse, suspicion. You heard what happened to the miller's son. He asked why Christ would punish a child who never sinned. 2 weeks later he was gone. They said he ran off. Others whispered he'd been taken. No one looked for him. Because the priest said, better to lose one than let doubt spread. You learned that lesson, so you swallowed your questions. You nodded when they said angels watched you sleep. You nodded when they said your hunger was a blessing. You nodded when they said the plague was God's will, and eventually you stopped wondering, because it was safer to kneel, safer to memorize the prayers, safer to say Amen even when you didn't understand. Safer to bow your head when the sermon turned sharp, safer to confess thoughts before they became sentences. You learned how to feel guilty for things you hadn't done. You learned to be ashamed of your mind. You learned to flinch at your own imagination, because the church didn't need chains, it just needed fear. Fear turned inward, fear of yourself. They didn't want silence because you were obedient. They wanted silence because you were afraid to speak. And so you didn't read, didn't write, didn't question, didn't think. You just learned to kneel and call that submission faith. You were told it was faith, but it never felt like hope. It felt like weight, like a presence pressing on your chest from the moment you woke until the moment you slept, and sometimes even in your dreams. You didn't carry belief like a candle. You carried it like a chain. You obeyed not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of the unknown, fear of what might happen if you ever dared to stop pretending you believed. They dressed it in beauty, stained glass, incense, chant. But beneath the color and smoke was a cold system, a system built not to lift you up, but to hold you in place, to turn your hunger into humility, to turn your confusion into silence, to turn your suffering into submission, and to tell you again and again that this was holy. They taught you that obedience was sacred, that questioning was sin, that your body was shameful, and your thoughts were dangerous. They warned you about hell so often you forgot to imagine heaven. They made you confess before you could speak clearly, made you fear your own children's fates before they were even born. They told you your pain was earned, your poverty was ordained, your fear was righteous. And through it all they smiled, they called it salvation. They promised peace while holding a knife to your soul. And you, like everyone else, learned to smile back. You sang hymns with cracked lips. You lit candles with shaking hands. You bowed your head not because you felt small before God, but because you knew better than to look up. This wasn't faith. Not the kind that frees, not the kind that comforts. It was fear, cultivated, institutionalized, sanctified, and they didn't hide it. They didn't have to, because in their world, fear was the tool, and you were the soil. And if you ever forgot that, all you had to do was miss Mass once, bury a child without rites, speak too loud, think too long, and wait for the knock on the door or the silence that followed, because faith in the Middle Ages was never yours. It was theirs, and it was always watching.